folks, I'm Tom Vasel, and welcome to the History of the Dice Tower Part 4, which I thought would be the final part, but will not. So last time I talked about how I was running the Dice Tower podcast. We had it up and going, and now we needed to know where are we going to go next. But I did, again, a lot of time people have these long, grandiose plans. They're like, what is the purpose of this? I remember way back in the day, Scott Nicholson emailed me and said, what is the purpose of your podcast? Do you have a purpose? What is your goal? And I was like, I don't know, we're just having fun, we're having a good time. And that's kind of where I was at different points. And it wasn't until I was pulled into that conference in Malaysia and I said, well, maybe we can do more than this. I never got into reviewing to get free games. I never got into reviewing to get any money because at this point in time, I hadn't got any money from the podcast. But I was like, well, I'm just a very focused person and I like to do a lot of things and just keep going, like the Energizer Bunny. So this was 2005 was what I would call, 2006, I guess, because this was at the end of 2005, moving into 2006, was a big year of changes. And so in 2006, we said, okay, what are we going to do with the podcast? The podcast is going to change, so I was thinking about this for a long time. But as we were thinking, different things started to happen. First, we had a couple people send us in sound clips to put on the podcast. One of these was Moritz Eggert from Germany. It was a little segment that basically was like, you guys need to pronounce German words correctly. Here's a primer. I thought it was hilarious. The audience thought it was hilarious. And for a while, Moritz, and his first segment was January 23rd, 2006, was a regular contributor on our show. And in fact, on that same show that we posted there, our wives came on for the first and last time I think my wife was on the podcast, but we convinced them to come on and do their top 10.
He just comes right through the door and says, hey, look what I got today. Or, oh yeah, that's right. I ordered another game over the internet. And so usually I find out about it before it actually gets there. And then I have some time to get used to it before it actually comes in.
I don't sneak games in the house all the time.
Well, what kind of themed games are you getting, Tom?
So, no, I used to just make big orders and I'd forget to tell her and I'd say, oh yeah, by the way, I ordered a big load of games.
And I was always looking for some new thing that we could do. In February 2006, Fair Play Games, I started looking to work with them, to have them host the show. I started looking around because I said, what can we do? We're working with Board Game News and this is great, but maybe we need some sponsors. Maybe we need to do something for this. And in March, our microphones weren't really doing well. And I said, all right, let's put out the call. Maybe we can get some new microphones for us to run it. And I was amazed that a few people sent money in. Again, this was before Patreon, this was before Kickstarter, and people just sent some money to us, and I was like, wow, I hadn't expected that, but we were trying to make our stuff better. Well, at this point in time, we were a little bit successful, not a lot, and so criticism starts appearing. All right, well, that is what it is. And Joe was about to leave. Joe left a few episodes before he actually left, if you know what I mean. He was getting ready to go, move on, and I was like, all right, what do I want to do? Well, Sam Healey, who had been there since the beginning, he wasn't really there when me and Joe decided to start the podcast. Me and Joe hung out all the time. We were like best friends. And Sam was there, but he just wasn't around us all the time. So he was like, oh man, I would help you guys out with the podcast. I would have done the podcast. And so we had him on a few times. And then I was like, all right, well, Joe's leaving. It seems obvious that Sam will come in and take his spot. So I talked to Sam about it. And I said, Sam, you can come on, but if you do this, Joe and I had this equal thing. It's not going to be that way anymore. I'm just going to run the podcast and you'll be my co-host to come on. That just, to me, clearer. And I'm also going to be radically overhauling the podcast because I thought I want to hear more voices. And this has been something I have always believed on the Dice Tower. I've always thought the Dice Tower cannot be just Tom Vasel. Well, I haven't always thought that, I guess, when I was first writing reviews, but it's something that I started formulating even back then, and I still think it today. I wanted more people on, so I invited people to come on and do segments. I picked some people who highly criticized me on the internet to come on to the first couple episodes. There's a guy named Doug Cooley who was scathing towards us. I said, show me how it's done. Come on and do a segment. And we had a lot of different little segments on the show. And episode 51 came, and I was like, all right, new theme, new announcer, new everything. We got Mike Fitzgerald, designer of Wyatt Earp and the Mystery Rummy series, and a former radio personality, start doing our things. And I said, here we go, new segments, it's Sam, kaboom! And I got all these emails that said, your show sucks now. I was like, all right. And this is where I learned, when you make a change, People are never going to be happy, but if you stick with the change, if you believe with the change, and if the change is actually good, as time goes by, people will stick it out with you. And that is what happened here too. Although we were still kind of stuck with a 72-minute. Why was I doing 72-minute shows? Because a lot of people told me they were downloading them and burning them onto CDs, which incidentally, I've just read in a news story that the CD is being retired. But at this time, CDs were still a big deal, and so we kept our shows in there. Also around this time, halfway through 2006, I did my 500th review. And something else happened in 2006, which might not seem like a big deal. Mark Jackson started something called the Apples Project, where a whole bunch of people say, these are the best of these games, and these are the best of these games. And I was like, wow, it's great getting a group of people together to say the best of different things. I'm going to do that too. And so I started doing things like that. And it just gave me ideas, and I was always watching what other people did. I wanted to show that we had made a clean break with Sam and kind of show where the show was going at that point in time. And so I decided to pull the first 50 episodes off the internet and put them on a DVD and sell that DVD and see if we made any money that way. I believe we've sold 25 or so total in the last 15 years. Huge error on my part, but it wasn't like I put a lot of money into it. I just used one of those places where you can custom imprint it, but it was just like, wow. So that's not what people are interested in. People were interested in downloading and listening to this stuff. I was still running my interviews with an Optimist. I did my final one with Stephen Glenn, and I said, all right, I'm getting tired of this writing back and forth with people. I really like the audio thing. I really like talking. Let's start some audio interviews. And I started some audio interviews, although that fizzled out pretty quickly, but the interviews with the Optimist series kind of ended at that point. That was September 2006. In October in 2006, I decided that I was going to stop doing that column I was doing for Board Game News for Rick, just because the Dice Tower was taking up so much of my time. I started missing columns, and I hate missing things. I like to do things consistently. And then just a month after that, Rick Thornquist said, I'm retiring and I'm shutting down Board Game News. And I said, oh, no. Okay. What are we going to do with our show? This is where our show was posted. So I started scrambling behind the scenes. So first I went to Board Game Geek. I said, I know they offered me something way back when. And I said, hey, would you guys be interested? And they said, maybe. And Dirk Sokol said, yeah, you can come on and you can put your show on here. And I said, okay, but I want to check with some other places first because we might be able to get some compensation. He said, well, you're not getting any compensation from us. I said, all right. Gotcha. I wasn't asking for it. I just was trying to think of the different options. And I talked to Fun Again Games, and they had some sort of thing where we could get some games at cost from them if we hosted our show there. And I said, great, Fun Again Games. I really like these guys. I did some other work where I wrote some blurbs for their website, and they were able to fly me to Origins one year. So I thought, hey, I like working with these guys. I said, all right, let's do it. Let's work with Fun Again. Rick Thornquist said, good news. Even though I'm retiring, we have a new writer who's taking over Board Game News, Eric Martin, one of the columnists. And I said, oh, man, sorry, guys, I already agreed to leave and go with Fun Again. So it was what it was. I probably would have stayed with Board Game News otherwise, but this gave me a chance to go and have a sponsor in Fun Again Games, which has just, as of me doing this, announced that they're no longer been an online store any longer, but they were good by us. They did good. They were fantastic to work with. I never had one problem with them. Although at this point in time in 2006, I was still posting the show by sending it to someone at Fun Again, and then they would post it. That's what I've been doing with Rick, which was great, but sometimes when you send something to someone that doesn't get posted right away, I now post the show myself, which still doesn't always work right, but it was just another step that I was doing at that point in time. We were still looking for ways to maybe monetize Dice Tower a little bit. Again, it never occurred to me that this was a job or anything. I just was thinking, we get a little bit of money for efforts. We started selling dice boots. They were Dice Towers, but they were a specific one, and we got it imprinted with the Dice Tower logo on it, which someone had made us a Dice Tower logo at this point. Super cool. We got a Dice Tower logo. In fact, I had Origins. When I went to Origins, I said, we're going to start pushing this Dice Tower logo. I had magnets made, and I had this big box of magnets, and I got to the airport, and the airport said, you can't put that into your luggage. I was like, what? It's a big magnet. I was like, oh. I said, can I have some of the magnets? So I put like 30 of the magnets and took them and handed them out at Origins, then shipped the rest to Rick, and he just handed them out at other conventions. But I said, we got to get our name out there. We got to get our brand out there. I'm going to buy some stuff, but if I'm going to buy some stuff, I need to get some money to buy this stuff with. And that's what the Dice Boots helped us get it. So we were kind of slowly starting to brand. I would go and just print up flyers about the Dice Tower. I walked to one guy. I remember was meeting people and be like, hey, I'm Tom Vasel from the Dice Tower. Will you listen to my podcast? I did what I could to build the Dice Tower up. One of the ways we also did during this year in 2006 and 7 was also through contests, where I was like, all right, we want to have contests. We want more people to listen to the show. So as we moved into 2007, at the beginning of the year, it was kind of a quiet year. And I said, we're going to have contests. We're going to get people to listen to the show that year. And that's when I almost quit reviewing. So it was kind of a double-edged sword here. The pastor at our church in Korea decided to retire, to leave. He didn't retire very long. He went somewhere else like a couple months later. But at this point, he was retiring. And so the church asked me to become the next pastor. And I said, all right, being pastor, that's a pretty big responsibility. Am I going to have time to continue reviewing and doing the Dice Tower? So that was kind of going through my mind. And just a transitional period. Not every pastor is greeted with, we think you're just as good as the old pastor. Sometimes it doesn't work that way. So there was that going on. But then also, the internet exploded. Now, I've always had people criticizing my reviews and being negative towards my reviews since I started posting them a few years earlier than this. But it really boiled to a head. It's kind of weird to think that this is 10 years ago now, but it really boiled to a head. There were several people on Board Game Geek who they criticized and they called us shills, and were constantly going after not just me, but other people. And Rick Thornquist actually pulled off the internet completely for a while because of how vicious it got. And this just really came to a boil, and it was really frustrating for a while. Honestly, nothing that we've done in the past 10 years has even come close to that. And if anything, that's kind of prepared us. People say, how can you handle the backlash on the internet? Like, well, 2007. But I really did seriously considering stop reviewing at this point and stopping the podcast. I said, you know what? I'm just going to concentrate on being a pastor. I don't think I can do both of these. For a while, I put out something on the internet. I said, would you guys rather the podcast or would you rather the reviews? I don't know if I can do both. And the people who listen to the podcast said, do the podcast. And the people who read the reviews said, do the reviews. And I said, well, it would be hard to do the podcast without getting the review copies for the reviews. And then I didn't stop either one of them. But something did change, and we'll talk about that in a bit. But I almost thought about quitting. But at the same time, I was like, what else? Maybe let's do something different. So 2007 is one of the more boring years of the Dice Tower, but a couple things. First, I worked with a whole bunch of other podcasts because I wasn't the only guy in town. Lots of podcasts were starting up. And so I said, let's all get together and let's do some awards. We're pretty smart with board games. We're experts at board gaming. Let's put some awards together. And so let's call them the Podcast Awards. But Scott Nicholson said, well, I'm doing video. I was like, all right. So we called them the Gamecast Awards, which name lasted for like 10 minutes. And then eventually we called them the Board Game Podcaster Awards. So I put this together. We got a whole bunch of people together. We got committees. It took us forever to pick the name. It took us forever to pick how it went. We finally got the awards out. They went okay. Each podcast talked about it. And I said, man, that seemed like a lot of work. This committee thing really wore on me. So the next year I just said, I'm doing the Dice Tower Awards. Any other podcasters, you're welcome to join me. And you guys can vote on the games. I don't care what games win, but I'm going to put the rules in place so that it just goes smoothly. And these were kind of like the Dice Tower Awards the first year, but they really started in 2008. We also looked for some sponsorship during this time. And we had a few episodes sponsored by different people for very, very low prices. The Dice Tower Guild, they started guilds, which were like forums on Board Game Geek, and that kind of exploded and became a way where we had a lot of communication with the people who listened to our show. And in Korea, one of the guys who came to my church, Ted Shin, got me involved with the military bases, and we were able to start military board game clubs at Camp Casey and Camp Red Cloud. And so we were doing the Camp Casey one once a month, and we were doing Camp Red Cloud every week, actually. And so I was playing games and doing things there. And so we were having this fantastic time. My crisis with the internet, I was like, all right, put your big pants on, Tom, get your armor up. This is not a big deal. You're probably going to deal with this for the next year or two, or decade as it turns out to be. And I realized that there was a lot of people. I have so many emails from people that were so positive. It was good to see that Dice Tower was making a difference. And the audio podcast. But I was still getting a little tired of writing my podcast. And that's when, for some reason, the idea of video came in my head. and I'll talk about that next time. All right, well, thanks for watching this. Now, the next episode of the History of the Dice Tower isn't going to be up for a week or so, so hopefully you can hang on till then. This is probably boring everyone to death anyway, but for me it's been a lot of fun going back through these emails and putting all this together. Until next time, I'm Tom Vasel, though, and you've been watching the History of the Dice Tower.